What happens if you don't cut or brush your hair for more than half a century? What do teeth that haven't been brushed in 20 years look like? And how does a person who last slept in 1973 feel? You're about to see it all and find out. This is Infinity, and in this episode I'll show you these and other unique people and share their amazing stories. Let's go! Tran Van Hay. In 1931, Tran Van Hay was born in Vietnam. Most likely, this man would have remained an unknown man if one day he didn't make the decision to stop cutting and brushing his hair. Thanks to this strange decision, he became famous throughout the world. Tran began growing his hair at the age of about 30 and didn't stop doing it until his death. For the last 50 years of his life, he never cut his hair. He also never brushed his hair, but he did wash it once in a while. However, he wasn't really into it. Tran soaked his hair just a couple of times a year to freshen it up a bit. As a result, he grew a lock of hair more than 20 feet long and weighing more than 22 pounds. As you can see from the pictures, Tran's hair didn't look like a wig or a braid, rather a huge snake like an anaconda or a python. To keep his hair from getting tangled under his feet, the Vietnamese used to wrap it around his head, and the result was a natural turban. Not surprisingly, Hay's hair was mostly brown at the ends and gray only at the base, because he stopped cutting it when he was a young man and had not yet had time to gray. It's also interesting that nature was very generous to the unusual Vietnamese. He didn't go bald one bit, and his hair grew until his death in 2010. For such an unusual appearance, Tran might well have qualified for the Guinness Book of World Records, but he didn't want to apply. Sakal Dev Tooty. Next up is another lover of long hair. 66-year-old Sakal Dev Tooty from the Indian state of Bihar has also given up cutting hair. Sakal has not visited his barber in about 45 years. The reason for this brave decision is believed to be a dream Sakal had long ago. One night, while he was sleeping, his hair was pulled into one big dreadlock. And that same night, a deity appeared to him in a dream and forbade him to cut or brush his hair. Sakal took this as a divine blessing and woke up determined never to cut or brush his hair again. Plus, unlike Tran Van Hay, he completely renounced washing his hair. And to finally enter the new life, the Indian also gave up bad habits. In 45 years, the Indian's hair has grown by almost 6.5 feet. Like for Tran Van Hay, it's not easy for Sakal with this weight on his head. Normally, he just drags this huge dreadlock behind him, but if he has to go somewhere, Sakal usually braids the dreadlock into a kind of a very strange ponytail, which looks more like a carpet on his head. Interestingly, this uncomfortable head of hair has not prevented Sakal from working for over 30 years in the forestry department, and the Indian record holder is now known as a healer in his village. Sakal helps locals treat infertility with special medicines and potions that he prepares in his home. Jay. A young guy from Britain named Jay looks quite ordinary. Unlike Sakal or Tran Van Hay, there's no way to tell what's wrong with him. But that's until he opens his mouth. For more than 20 years, Jay has not brushed, flossed, or rinsed his teeth, and generally had no regard for oral hygiene. This was largely the fault of the boy's parents, who were not particularly interested in their son's health. As the years went by, lack of hygiene began to ruin Jay's teeth and make his mouth a real hell. But Jay wasn't about to brush or go to the dentist. He was too afraid of dentists. Fortunately, everything came to an end. A few years ago, Jay visited the clinic, and the dentist really got to work on his decaying teeth. They removed nearly half of his teeth, replaced them with implants, and destroyed the dental scale. Look at how the guy transformed after that. Now Jay can smile without fear of showing his teeth. He became friends with hygiene too, and now brushes and flosses his teeth regularly. Amal Haji. The next person from this episode, Amal Haji, like the Briton Jay, also didn't brush his teeth for a long time. But in addition to that, he didn't wash for a long time. How long? More than 67 years. This resident of Iran is a local celebrity. Amal's been dubbed the dirtiest man on the planet, and you can readily believe it. The Iranian abandoned all hygiene procedures when he was young because of emotional setbacks and psychological trauma. Over time, the problems drove him to the point where Amal became panic-stricken with fear of water. He was sure he'd get sick, die, or become even more miserable as soon as he touched water. But that wasn't all. Amal is also a real tramp. He now lives in a small hut, but for a long time he lived in a kind of dugout. In warm weather, Amal lies on the ground and smokes. Sometimes he smokes regular cigarettes, and sometimes he smokes a pipe filled with the products of animal life. As if this abomination weren't enough, The Iranian also eats raw or rotten meat and drinks rainwater, which he collects in a dirty oil tank. Fresh food and water are not consumed by the tramp as a matter of principle, although sometimes he is fed by the locals. What's funny and strange with all his lifestyle, Amau takes care of himself. He often admires himself in a small mirror and trims his hairstyle when his hair grows too much. For this, he simply sets fire to part of the hair. Amau is also actively searching for a better half and hopes to find a significant other. But what's even more surprising is the health of the Iranian. Despite the fact that he literally lives in dirt, eats whatever he can, and doesn't practice proper hygiene, Amau has no serious diseases or even parasites. What is it? Incredible luck or perfect genetics? Why do you think Amau Haji manages to stay healthy? Share your thoughts in the comments, and stay tuned to see some more extremely unusual people. Sridhar Shalal. We usually cut our nails as they grow. Some do it every few days, some do it a couple of times a month, and some don't do it themselves at all and visit the nail salon regularly. How much would the procedure cost if Sridhar Shalal were to come to the salon? Have a look at this Indian's left hand. This is what it would look like if you didn't cut your nails for decades. In 1952, when Sridhar was still in school and sitting in class, the teacher admonished him for a broken long fingernail on his hand. This triggered the boy, and he decided to forget about scissors and a fingernail file. The next time he cut his nails wasn't until 2018, 66 years later, when he was already an old man. During that time, his nails had grown a total of 358.1 inches in length, meaning that the nail on each finger was about 6.5 feet long. How do you like that? Not surprisingly, the usual tools were not able to manage. Indian manicure was done with a saw. Now his nails are on public display in a museum in New York's Times Square, and Sridhar Shalal's name is in the Guinness Book of Records. By the way, Sridhar could have grown even longer nails, but at some point they began to interfere with his sleep. And besides, he couldn't find a job with this feature. How long have you ever been awake? Do you have your own record? Maybe one day? Maybe a couple of days? Or have you managed to stay awake for about a week? My record's a couple of days without sleep. Even though it's not healthy, a week without sleep is a hefty record. But not for Thai Ngoc, a Vietnamese who never sleeps at all. Literally. But it wasn't always like this. The last time Thai slept, in 1973, in the same year he suffered a terrible fever, which left him with an unpleasant complication. The Vietnamese man permanently lost sleep. And it's not just insomnia or anything else. Ngoc really doesn't sleep, no matter how hard he tried to wear himself out, no matter what decoctions he took, no matter how many sleeping pills he drank, and no matter how much he cheated nature, he could no longer physically fall asleep. It's known that chronic lack of sleep has a very bad effect on health. A person begins to get sick often, feeling constantly tired, lethargic, and irritable. Surprisingly, Ngoc was relatively okay. He felt fine for the first decades and only about 15 years ago began to experience the consequences of a life without sleep. According to the Vietnamese man, sometimes he feels like a plant that's not being watered. Since Thai doesn't need to sleep, he takes advantage of his unique superpower and works 2 jobs. He farms during the day and works as the farm caretaker at night. Scientists are amazed by the phenomenon of the Vietnamese man. They examined him and concluded that despite his lack of sleep, Thai is almost completely healthy, except for a slight decrease in liver function. Thai Ngoc hasn't slept since he was about 30, and Han Langseth stopped shaving his beard since he was 30. He didn't shave until his death at the age of 81. At that time, in 1927, Hans Langseth was the owner of the longest beard in history. Over a period of 61 years, Hans had grown an incredible beard which was almost 18 feet long. It's now housed in the Smithsonian National Museum of Natural History in Washington, D.C. The beard was found in the attic of a North Dakota estate. It's thought to have been deposited there by one of Hans' sons who cut the beard off the deceased man's face after his father's death. Hans was known to have been a farmer for most of his life, but he was also adventurous. There was a period when he traveled with a traveling circus, in which he became famous with his beard. He showed his record-breaking beard to the public, but very soon, tired of this kind of performance, the audience didn't believe in such a length and tried to constantly check it by pulling the Norwegian by the hair. The man didn't shave for a long time. Check. People who didn't wash for a long time, or cut their hair or nails. Check. Who else can I tell you about? How about the person who didn't leave the house for decades? Nadezhda Bushayeva became famous a couple of years ago on the internet when users learned about her story. The resident of a village in Nizhny Novgorod, Russia, had spent 26 years in captivity, but not willingly. As it turned out, her own mother wouldn't let her out of the house. She wanted to protect Nadezhda from dangers from outside, so she left home for the last time in 8th grade and came out again when she was 42 years old. Besides her mother, Nadezhda's neighbors were rats and cats. Speaking of cats, Nadezhda had to eat cat food and rotten milk while living in a house without electricity and water. As a result, when volunteers and reporters found out about her story and came to see her, they saw a woman whose hair was in a huge tangle, her clothes were worn out, and her face was emaciated and filthy. It's horrible even to imagine how the woman managed to survive in such terrible conditions. But the main thing is that this story ended well. Soon, Nadezhda was rescued from her imprisonment and restored to health. That's all, guys. How long can you stay at home? Let me know in the comments. Thanks for watching, and see you later.